Welcome back to Smart Talk Sabah. I'm Joanna Suhenli Rampas, and let me start off with the most consequential legal story of the week. Now, this week we are looking at Sarawak that has formally filed a petition challenging three federal petroleum laws in the federal court. And this is not just about Sarawak story, but this is also about Sabah too. In fact, Borneo for that matter. Now, tonight with me, again, my co host is going to be with me, Nizam,
Yes. Yo.
and as well as the second time in the studio, Jesselton, Jason James, and he's the Vice President of the Sabah Oil and Gas Services Council. Thank you so much, Jesselton, for coming back here to the studio again.
It's my pleasure.
Right. Thank you. So, as for starters, I think should you go first, maybe? Isam? on the issue of Sarawak filing the petition to the federal court.
Kan? Saya baca lah kan dia punya apa.
All right.
So Monday, 23rd of February, the state of Sarawak said they will be filing a petition to the federal court to challenge three federal laws governing petroleum as a part of a broader effort to control more of its natural resources. The backstory is that 2024, they set up their own firm known as Petros to procure, distribute, supply, and sell all natural gas. And this puts it into conflict with Petronas, the national petroleum energy firm. So basically, the challenge is on three laws: Petroleum Development Act 1974, the Continental Shelf Act 1966, and the Petroleum Mining Act of 1966. This is also in response to an application by Petronas back in January 2026, seeking clarity and about the legal and regulatory framework about Sarawak's own framework of governing gas operations in Sarawak. That hearing is scheduled for March 16. So there's a lot of challenges, legal challenges here from Sarawak and so Petronas. So it's being, and also with the upcoming, I think the MA63 dashboard coming in, jadi barang ni menjadi perkara topik yang panas lah.
Yeah.
So that's why we have this episode.
In fact, I think this is possibly the most consequential story of this decade. And if, whatever happens with this legal battle, it's definitely going to change the whole landscape, especially with, Sabah, Sarawak, and as well as federal in terms of oil and gas industry, right? So for starters, maybe, Jesselton, let's look into the economic states behind this legal battle. And being in the Sabah Oil and Gas Services Council, of course, at this time, Sabah remains a spectator, I should say. Yeah, nothing much has been said from Sabah as much as this legal between Sarawak, Petros for that matter, and as well as Petronas is going on. But let's look into the economic stakes. Beyond the constitutional arguments, I think the more urgent question here is that, how this will affect the fiscal outcome, especially here in Sabah and Sarawak and Malaysia as a whole for that matter. So, because when we talk about petroleum laws, what we are really talking about is fiscal stability, investors' confidence, of course, and long-term development planning, and not just sovereignty. So, how do you see this this whole battle will affect the the fiscal stability and of course the confidence of the investors coming into Petronas for that matter?
I might say that at the current moment, investors are, of course, talking because there is a certain uncertainty. Investors do not like uncertainty. So, oil majors, when they invest in our territory or when they start exploration activities, of course, they will comply to all the license, the regulations. But if you have two sets of
Frameworks lah.
then it will make a difficult situation for the investors. But I believe Sarawak and Petronas would somehow come to a solution on that. But in terms of Sabah, I might say, Sabah, we are doing what we call a more commercial collaboration way of doing things. We have our commercial collaboration agreement. I think
The one with Petronas,
in 2021 was signed. Because of that, in terms of stability in Sabah, in terms of oil and gas stability, investors' confidence is much more in Sabah. We can see the recent mega announcement by Petronas themselves. We can see recent visit of ConocoPhillips, the CEO president himself, who came to visit Yang Amat Berhormat Ketua Menteri to state their intention that ConocoPhillips will continue their investment in Sabah itself. Sabah have a lot of potential in a way, our oil and gas, in our deep waters, in our east coast. So we see this uncertainty in terms of policy in Sarawak might favor Sabah in a way, because investors might come in. That's my point of view, what I see, how this current situation happening in Sarawak might actually comes to the benefit of Sabah.
In terms of the framework, right, the differences between what's in Sarawak and Sabah, can you try to explain, like, in layman's terms, like, what are the essential differences, like oil and gas businesses when they go into Sarawak and Sabah?
I think our state government, we go to a very pragmatic way of dealing this. Right? Sarawak, they would like to go on an operational sense. Well, they have the capacity in terms of the monetary capacity and also maybe the technical capacity. But in terms of Sabah, we are still slowly going into that direction. I believe in the future, Sabah will be in the operator role. But right now, we are Sabah as through SMJ Energy. They are being sophisticated investors in a way. So they invest in oil fields. For example, we have the recent announcement where Sabah further expanded from its Semarang PAC. They have 50% equity there. To the North Sabah equity, they have 20%, recently announced by Petronas itself. So this will subsequently increase the revenue of the state through oil, not only oil royalty. We not only receive oil royalty and the sales service tax, but we also further receive dividend from the sales of those oil. For example, in Semarang, they already have the 9 or the 10 offtake of oil. So those profits will be entering into the state, and then subsequently SMJ Energy will pay the dividends to the Ministry of Finance, etc. So this is a very, what we can see, a very much pragmatic way of doing things, and a much, I might say, a collaborative way with Petronas in ensuring that Sabah is able to monetize all their natural resources.
So perhaps what you're trying to say here, Jesselton, is that the way forward perhaps is not very much on confrontation, but more of a collaborative way of handling oil and gas in Sabah, for that matter. In Malaysia.
Our agreement, I mean, in Sabah, you see, the agreement itself is called a commercial collaboration agreement. The name of the agreement itself is a collaboration. And we can see that collaboration works. Sabah had increased its, what you call the numbers in terms of payment or dividend derived from all this oil, what you call 50%, 20%, etc. And another way of how Sabah benefit is through the OGSE segment, or the oil and gas services and equipment segment. They actually able to achieve 2 billion ringgit worth of contract value recently. So we are able to get this through the commercial collaboration agreement. What we see that this approach that we have It's more or less a very good approach. And I think the Sabah state would like to continue on that approach.
So, Jesselton, I wanted to know more about the differences like in the regulatory framework between Sabah and Sarawak in terms of oil and gas business. Maybe so we can educate our audience. Why is it different for when Sarawak is challenging and Sabah? What does it affect?
Sabah, I mean, in terms of the regulatory framework, we have SMJ Energy in the upstream segment, and we have, I believe, SEC is in the so-called like an aggregator role in Sabah itself.
SEC is what?
Sabah Energy Corporation.
I see.
So Sabah Energy Corporation had been quite some time in Sabah already. And they are into the natural gas business itself.
Okay.
So in terms of these entities in Sabah, they are collaborating very well with Petronas in terms of ensuring continuity of business, continuity of the supply of natural gas and the supply of crude oil, and ultimately that brings benefit to the state in terms of the state receiving dividends from these business entities that they set up in Sabah itself.
Okay. So how does it work in Sarawak? Like I understand, like Petros will have a authority, is it, or is it the state government has the power to?
I believe in Sarawak, they have the oil mining ordinance itself, and they also have the distribution gas ordinance 2016, which had been challenged by the Sarawak state government. So this basically empowers Petros to be the sole oil and gas company in Sarawak, and also so-called the sole aggregator. So because of that, they are currently challenging Petronas, I believe, for the role as a sole aggregator, so that they could potentially receive more revenues from the oil and gas resources in Sarawak. So that's how Sarawak approach, which also more or less similar to Sabah's approach. But of course, in Sabah, we are more on a collaborative basis together with Petronas. Negotiation is there, and I believe Sarawak also have the negotiation itself, ongoing negotiation with Petronas to ensure more oil and gas rights for the respective state itself. Yeah.
Maybe Nizam, you could share your thoughts about these as a lawyer yourself, right? So there are the 3 laws that they are bringing into account. Of course, maybe you could explain a little bit to our audience about yang tiga undang-undang ini.
Lah. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to know more about the local, the state, because like we see with the announcement, they're challenging the PDA, the CSA, and also the Petroleum Mining Act, right? So these are all laws, like the Petroleum Development Act 1974. It basically gave the ownership control to Petronas to centralize the licensing and production. So it basically consolidated not only Sabah, Sarawak, but the whole of Malaysia to have one body. So it moved that towards a national framework. So I guess it's about control and making sure that it gives that power, that leverage for Sabah, also for Malaysia at the time, to develop its oil and gas reserves. And then the Continental Shelf Act, 1966, it covers the offshore seabed beyond territorial waters. Usually, this gives the federal government jurisdiction over the offshore resources. So this was enacted before PDA, 1966. If I'm not mistaken, this was enacted during the proclamation of emergency in
1969,
Darurat. So when the Darurat ordinances were revoked in 2011, they actually enacted another law called the Territorial Seas Act 2012, which is another thing, not challenged. But then again, the third one is the Petroleum Mining Act 1966, another licensing structure before PDA. It's basically another regulatory layer, but it makes it a federal framework. So now with Sarawak doing the ordinances to regulate. I guess that's the challenge that between federal and state legal framework on controlling these resources, whether federal laws override state laws. But as we know, as we understand in constitutional law, there is articles in the constitution to say if there's a federal law that's inconsistent with state law, the federal law would appeal. But so I think I can see like there's a challenge here different to that, because Sarawak would claim that it is part of the formation of Malaysian agreement. So it's different. It's already embedded in the constitutional framework, which is different from enacting a simple state law. So it's a reclaiming. So I can see that there's arguments, legal perspectives on that. So that's my context lah, on the legal context of it. But I think the reality is macam mana dia bagi effect on the business side of things, because we this kind of challenges or confirmation or basically gray area, I don't think it gives any confidence to operators and oil and gas, right? And so that's why we needed to get Jesselton to give some insight.
Yeah, I think if I may add to that, and maybe Jesselton, you can give your opinion about this, your views on it. I think we also have to acknowledge something uncomfortable here. The bigger fiscal picture, I would say. Malaysia's fiscal position right now is not as strong as it was a decade before, right? And federal deficits remain elevated, and subsidies as well. Subsidy rationalization is also going on, and if Petronas's margin are significantly reduced, and whether through higher tax or duplicative regulations or fragmented authority, and I think the fiscal ripple effect will be also felt nationwide, and I think in that matter, Sabah is not insulated from that too. What's your thought on that?
Overall, that might happen. Of course, we saw the effects when Sarawak start to challenge in terms of the sole aggregator role, but that was officially, I think, solved, so-called solved, on the 12th of May of 2025, if not mistaken. I might get the date wrong. But back in 2005, they had already made an agreement of where Sarawak would be and where Petronas would be. But then we see the current developments. Of course, we see investors are not comfortable, we might say. Investors are not comfortable with this kind of uncertainty. Even in the OGSC segment, we know that if investors are not coming in, rigs will not be moved. When rigs are not moved, oil will not come out, and then the services will not be employed. So of course there is a certain of jigginess, I might say, worriness that this would cause the ripple effect even to the OGSC segment. I'm saying also on behalf of the OGSC segment, there's worry there. But of course, I believe Sarawak will have a continuous talk with Petronas to solve this matter. But in terms of the business perspective or the business from the OGC segment, we are still waiting on what the policy will be. So that part, of course, the business segment is waiting, and then we would like to see, of course, a policy that's firm. And investors
Stable,
will be coming in, of course, stable. Investors will be coming in, then the services will pick up. But like I mentioned, I would like to mention again, in terms of Sabah, the collaborative method works. So because of the collaboration efforts in Sabah by the state government itself, in terms of having the oil rights, in terms of having equity, in terms of solving the OGSE so-called dilemma of contractual, we see actually an increase of contracts given to local companies. So last year alone, for 36% of overall Petronas contracts and PHCs in Sabah is awarded to Sabahan companies. So those policies that is firm, coming back to policy, firm policy as such, makes the investor confidence as, we have this policy for the local companies, so we shall abide to that policy. So they will make into their tender process on such policy. So I believe investors are willing to follow whatever policies that is set by the regulator itself. So the way forward is, of course, a firm policy for everybody.
Now, I think what Sarawak is doing too is, I think, Sabah, we as Sabahans, we should be looking and as well as learn and walk our own version of that path as well. And, and with the full weight of our constitutional rights behind us, obviously. But perhaps, it's very interesting when you said earlier about policy. You need to have a firm policy. And perhaps the way forward now is not confrontation, as you mentioned earlier about, the collaborative method or more of a pragmatic method of what Sabah is doing through SMJ Energy. But perhaps we also have to look into institutional refinement. For example, a clear, direction of the regulatory roles and perhaps a more transparent revenue sharing formulas as well. And I think, these are the issues that always are causing, Sabah and Sarawak to bring, the federal government or Petronas for that matter to court. Periodic reviews built into law, not just negotiated ad hoc, for example, right? And I think, with this sort of constructive forward path, I think that, and with a strong and a firm policy, that will increase the confidence of foreign direct investments coming in to Sabah, or in fact to Malaysia. And I think, we need sustainable revenues, obviously, jobs for our young engineers. You are in this industry, and obviously, this is very important, downstream industries and stable development planning. And so that's probably, how we should move forward. Nizam, what do you think?
It's true. I think the issue and topic about oil and gas rights for Sarawak and in this our angle for Sabah, it's not just about rights. The rights is one part of it.
Yeah.
We have issue about who owns the oil and gas reserve. But at this time and age, as we are in 2026, I think we can break out other layers into this issue. And number one, I can think revenue. It's all about the revenue that it brings to Sabah. What is the right model to actually bring the best revenue? And we should focus on that kind of approach. It doesn't have to be the same. It can be collaborative or confrontational, like you said. Then it's about regulatory control. How do we make sure the framework is stable, predictable, and accessible to the oil and gas industry players? Because at the end of the day, you give that confidence to investors. Oil and gas is not a cheap venture to go into.
Exactly.
It's not. It's not something. It's a different field because you're going into deep spending. There's elements of risk, elements of financing. So you need investors to be confident to bring in that kind of investors to come in. So with that confidence, you don't have to fork out your own money. This is where we played smart in managing our resources, which I think I mentioned last time it's finite. It's going day by day, and it's not only Sabah. It's a global issue, and we are also entering into this phase into like electric batteries, sustainability. So the value will fluctuate according to the times. So if we delay and make it protracted, kacau lah kita punya management. And I think like what Jessica mentioned, 36% of contracts awarded to Sabahan companies. The real, I think, effect and implication we need to see on whatever model we go is what is the downstream economic growth that is actually brought into this. So because at the end of the day, you don't just win on paper, but you win on site. Like who gets the benefit at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So there's no right or wrong, I think. But basically, this is what we should see it from a Sabah perspective.
Right. Jesselton, I'm very interested to know of your vantage point in SOG, SOGSI, right? What is the one metric you use to judge whether Sabah is truly moving of being just a resource province to being a serious oil and gas player in our rights?
Of course, we see the metrics itself that we have
Yeah.
in SOGSI point of view. Because SOGSI, we are a business association in a
Yeah.
sense. So our KPI is to ensure that Sabahan companies are able to participate. That's one. In the tenders in Petronas and the PACs in Sabah. Secondly is, of course, to see them able to achieve contracts. We have the data pre-CCA 2021.
Right.
I think 8% of the contract value are given to Sabahan companies. While right now, back in 2025, the numbers is now at hovering around 36%. So, and that translate into 2 billion ringgit revenue to Sabahan companies, and also translate to almost 1,000 job opportunity for Sabahans. So if we further increase the contract award to Sabahan, which the state government have planned for 60%, and subsequently for manpower to increase from 1,000 maybe to 3,000 manpowers. Because why? This 60% is into the more complex works. So 36% basically we managed to secure all the base work. So Sabah is able to secure those what we call senang-senang punya kerja, sudah.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of catering, in terms of
Supplying.
supplies and
Supply.
everything,
Basic
that's
stuff.
already basically
Starting to go through.
40% of the total contracts are all these low-hanging fruits.
Oh, right.
So in order for us to jumpstart more, we need to go on the higher end. So in order for us to go in the higher end, we need to have firm policies,
Yes.
which the state government is having right now. They are firmly saying that Sabahan companies need to be prioritized in the contracts and everything. So we are seeing those progress going up and up. The state government is aiming this year 60% contract value.
Double. More than that.
It's double the number. So SOGSI, in terms of our business, the council itself, we are supportive of this. Because why? This translate to Sabahan companies having the opportunity. They will spend in terms of expanding their capability, and therefore they will increase the number of Sabahan coming into the oil and gas segment. So means creating more job opportunity. So that's from the perspective of SOGSI. And what we see, we can comment a little bit on how the state, in terms of revenue sharing, they don't depend on the 5% royalty plus 5% SST. The state government is participating actively in terms of acquiring blocks, concession. And we can see the latest news. They acquired 20% of shares in the North Sabah PACs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that will subsequently translate to money coming into the state government. So that would be, I believe, how the state government use it for road infrastructure development. That's the prerogative of the state government itself. But we see that it is a workable model there. And in terms of the OGSC, it's a workable model and it's a successful model. So what we are seeing is hopefully this model can continue on and subsequently will lead Sabahan companies not only to be regional or jago kampung, we might say, but into an international players. When that happen, let's say a Sabahan company who managed to become the likes of, in terms of what we call contractors, we have contractors like McDermott, if you check. They are 100 years old companies employing 40 to 50,000 people. And that might even translate to 40,000 maybe
Jobs.
Sabahans to be there. So this will potentially bring more job creation value to Sabahans itself. That's from the perspective of the OJC itself. So we are going into that direction. Sabahans growing from Jago Kampung slowly to become maybe the regional players, national player, regional player, subsequently international players. So that's the aim that we are looking for. But we need to jumpstart somewhere. Where else to jumpstart if not our own home state itself? Yeah.
Do you think you have, Nizam, maybe any, models, elsewhere around the world that perhaps, that has a similar model, or maybe something that we could look into?
Yeah, I was interested like with Jago Kampung remark.
Yeah.
Chesterton.
Exactly.
So I did a bit of research in this. So I wanted to get Chesterton's perspective. Like in the country of Norway, they have a strong state control of their oil and gas firm, strong institutions, and they have strong investment into sovereign wealth management. So that's one way where they build the institutions first, and then they exercise control. An example of a successful nationalized institution, right? And then you have Canada, where we have a federal system, but there's a sharing between federal and provinces.
Provinces.
So there's a joint offshore management, and that's where I think if you can comment, resource federalism works when the roles are clear between provinces and the federal. And then you have examples like Indonesia, where it was decentralized into the provinces as well. But then they have issues with regulatory overlaps. Provinces punya overlap lain, national lain. And then, there's a lot of provincial nationalism, like control of their own sites. So it was struggling, and then they had to rebalance the control again. I think an example that I can think of is East Timor, Timor, when they gained the independence, they were really very passionate about protecting their resources. But once they had the independence and when they built some institutions and some infrastructure, they couldn't get the investors, the players to come in. And it was supposed to be one of the aces of that government, but it backlashed. Maybe you can comment on these kind of examples.
Yes, I think for Sabah perspective, we are already an example of Canada,
So that's Canada.
where between the federal and the province, or here we call the state, we are already in the collaboration method. So you see, like I mentioned just now, we don't only collect the 5%
Of the
royalty.
PDA.
Yeah.
We not only collect the 5% self-service tax for the petroleum products, but we also go into as an equity partner. So an equity partner, like I mentioned, 20%, 50% in the Semarang PACs, 20% in the North Sabah PACs, and subsequently the other oil fields, I might say.
Yeah.
So this is a workable model. We saw Canada is able to go forward in that model. So Sabah is going in that direction.
All right.
Because why Sabah is going in that direction? Number one, Sabah, we have to acknowledge that Sabah might not have that much of the monetary means
Capacity lah, the
and
means.
capacity, and then also the technical capacity itself. Because to operate an oil field is not as easy as operating some maybe
Others
kedai
things,
runcit or whatsoever, right?
Yep.
So coming back to that, the technical capabilities need to be there. The financial capability needs to be there. So the state is working in a very good model whereby they leverage Petronas technical capabilities, because Petronas and the PACs, they are already operating in those deemed successfully and monetized field.
Yeah.
So they just acquire shares there, and they're profit sharing from the shares. That would translate to dividend given to the state. So in my perspective, what Sabah state is doing right now
Yep.
is already in the right path. And I believe maybe Sarawak have a very different way of doing things, but more or less a solution need to be made into monetizing the assets, the resources of a particular state, and bringing in the suitable technical capability and the financial capability itself. Have to look into that aspect. So that's my point of view itself.
Okay. I guess back to the challenge itself, like, but for our audience is what they are trying to understand. What is actually Sarawak trying to challenge? I guess they want to, and that's the shared grievances that Sabahs may see. Like maybe, I think number one I can see is that whether federal parliament has over centralized this kind of petroleum powers, whether these federal powers actually apply the way they assume, and what's the actual balance here that should be applied. That's the gist of it, what they're challenging. But I can see like the options for Sabah here. Number one, I think easy one is we should observe what Sarawak does first.
Yeah.
It's a strategic kind of patience thing, wait and see. Or if maybe number two, you want to file your own constitutional reference of the thing. But number three, I think, which I personally think is more important, is we should focus on building capacity and negotiate on stronger positions, because your rights does not equate to things like revenue, investor confidence, and downstream economic growth. So in the governance kind of session, especially Sabah, which has only completed its state elections, I think we have to be wary of where we stand and where our priorities are at this moment. So what do you think, Joe?
I think, at the end of the day, and I think to conclude this, our conversation, I think East Malaysians' concern of resource governance is legitimate, right? And, but the reform should be constructive and not destabilizing. I think that is, if I may add to what you have mentioned earlier. And I think that, in my perspective, a mature federation does not fear of clarifications, but it has to welcome whatever the situation or the outcomes may be after this. And the goal, I think, should not be just about, victory for one level of government over another. But I think, the goal should be a petroleum framework that is fair, that is firm, clear, and sustainable for the next, 50, 100 years to come. And so, of course, Sarawak deserves justice. Sabah itself too deserves justice. But then Malaysia too deserves stability. So, I think responsible leadership must protect both. Yeah. That is my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I think the way forward is we need to get, of course, clarity on certain things.
Yeah.
But most importantly, the capacity and confidence
Yeah.
should be coupled together, equally as important as we see. As I think Jesserton from the OJC industry feels like that's the only way we can balance it in a
Correct.
win-win situation.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, don't mind, I might add a little
Yes,
bit.
please, Jess.
Of course, the policy in place is already there in Sabah itself, but technical capacity itself. So, you mentioned technical capacity. We are, of course, in progress to achieving a higher levels in terms of our technical capability and
Yes.
capacity. In the OGSA segment, that's where we see we increase our technical capacity. When we increase our technical capacity, we are able to achieve the tenders that we mentioned, 36% awarded to Sabahan. It all started with, of course, we need to have very firm and good policies
Yeah.
that is supportive for the whole ecosystem, and subsequently with that we will build up our technical capability, and of course that will lead to financial stability itself. So that's my take from whatever that we are discussing in terms of the oil and gas itself. Yeah.
Nizam, kita pula tengok apa perkembangan terkini di di West Malaysia. Mungkin tentang isu SPRM yang begitu hangat sekali ya. Mungkin
Yeah.
saya boleh start dengan naratif yang ada di dalam dalam media yang kita
Awam
nampak
sekarang lah.
sekarang ya. So, dia bermula dengan satu laporan Bloomberg yang menyebut bahawa Tan Sri Azam Baki memiliki jutaan saham dalam sebuah syarikat perkhidmatan kewangan yang digambarkan sebagai antara penyenarai awam terbesar ketika itu. So susulan daripada laporan tersebut, of course beliau menafikan tentang dakwaan berkenaan. Of course ini semua adalah alleged lah dakwaan,
course,
ya. Dan untuk mengeluarkan surat tuntutan ataupun letter of demand dan seterusnya memfailkan tindakan undang-undang. Now liputan media menyatakan beliau menyifatkan laporan itu sebagai memfitnah dan juga mengelirukkan, serta menjejaskan kredibiliti SPRM dengan tuntutan ganti rugi yang tinggi lah disebut dalam beberapa laporan.
Okay.
Jadi Nizam, how do you see this this whole chaos or alleged
Topik ini
menjadi sangat panas ini sekarang.
Panas dia, saya tengok dia sudah hangat dibincangkan di parlimen, di media massa dan juga I think netizen lah, media sosial lah. Because I think the issue here, it's not really about personalities. Even though we're talking about the ketua pengarah, but it's about institution because jawatan yang dia duduki itu iaitu ketua pengarah SPRM, Suruhanjaya Pencegah Rasuah Malaysia, dan ada allegation, ada tuduhan berkenaan dengan salah guna kuasa. So first of all, I think yang penting macam kita di STS ni pun tidak mau buat kesimpulan lah. It's all about guilt or innocent. Kita ada sistem perundangan, ada proses. Kita ini untuk bercakap pasal public confidence, keyakinan orang awam dengan isu-isu sebegini. Because at the heart of Malaysia's development and important also for Sabah is the credibility of our institutions and the people who run them. I think it's an asset that kita perlu untuk supaya kita punya ekonomi, kita punya masyarakat boleh berkembang. Jadi apa fakta yang Joe cakap? Ada allegation pasal shareholding. Ada, I think baru-baru ni ada MP yang minta RCI,
yes.
untuk investigate perkara ni. Ada yang minta perbincangan khusus usul di parlimen, ditolak oleh speaker, dan juga ada juga saman-saman kenyataan media daripada pihak government, daripada PMX dan juga political secretary pada PMX juga bagi kenyataan untuk ikut proses. But I think the issue here is whatever the outcome now, it is a prevailing issue on governance. Macam mana kita mau kawal kalau isu begini? Sebab dia akan melibatkan keyakinan rakyat kepada pemerintahan.
I think SPRM ini satu institusi yang digeruni oleh yang patut digeruni lah, right? Dan dalam masa yang sama dipercayai oleh rakyat. Now, as you mentioned tadi, when we come to talk about public confidence di sana kan, kepercayaan itu bukan hanya dibina melalui tangkapan ataupun dakwaan, tetapi melalui tadbir ulus yang jelas. Right? I think the governance part of it, right? Dan Malaysia memang sudah ada mekanisme dia when it comes to pengisytiharan aset untuk penjawat awam, termasuklah juga pegawai SPRM. Tetapi mungkin masih belum masuk fasa undang-undang deklarasi yang mandatory. Disahkan bebas ataupun dipantau secara telus seperti yang diamalkan oleh negara-negara maju yang lain. Contohnya macam negara-negara di Singapura ataupun UK atau Hong Kong for that matter, menunjukkan satu prinsip yang sama di mana integriti bukan hanya tentang menangkap pesalah tetapi satu sistem yang telus dan juga boleh disemak. Right?
Betul.
Di UK contohnya, pegawai kanan dan ahli parlimen mesti mengisytiharkan kepentingan kewangan mereka secara terbuka. Di Hong Kong, ICAC telah menerbitkan satu laporan tahunan yang terperinci yang diaudit. Di Australia pula, for example, terdapat satu pemantauan parlimen terhadap tadbir urus agensi anti rasuah. Right? You've been in Australia. Obviously, you would know this.
Yes.
And tanpa masuk campur tangan dalam operasi kes. So I think Malaysia juga mungkin boleh move towards that direction. Jadi ini bermakna mungkin sistem lah yang sedia ada sebelum ini perlu memberikan lebih keyakinan lah kepada rakyat dan juga pelabur. Dan saya rasa itulah satu reformasi yang perlu dipertingkatkan lagi.
Yeah, I think so. What this topic and issue actually raises is macam there's room for improvements in how we ensure the balance legal compliance dengan yang policy yang sedia ada, atau bagaimana kita mau sebenarnya menjaga keyakinan awam, public trust. Do we need another independent oversight?
Yeah.
So in certain sensitive cases, kalau dia oversight, macam mana power dia, siapa yang lantik, and bagaimana macam institusi boleh balance fairness dengan transparency sebenarnya. Because sebenarnya kalau due process ni kadang-kadang kita protect individu sebab dia ada proses kan, tapi transparency yang penting untuk protect institusi. And then perbezaan yang saya nampak di negara-negara lain adalah dari mana segi level kita memperjelaskan transparency tersebut. How transparent do you mean? And then it's also about how transparent is your attitude towards issues of bribery. Begitu. Sebab we can talk about bribery givers, we can talk about bribery takers, tapi the attitude about the actual act of bribery itself perlu diubah suai. Kita tidak boleh persalahkan satu pihak sahaja. Semua pihak mempunyai peranan dia dalam menghidupkan budaya korupsi dalam semua level, bukan saja di pemerintahan tapi mungkin di level atas jalan. Sebab mungkin kadang-kadang kita mau cepat, ada pemikiran kita mau jalan pintas, mungkin ada. Jadi itu lebih pada mindset juga, dan kita perlu kaji bagaimanakah kita punya institusi boleh diperbaiki untuk, dan juga budaya kita diperbaiki supaya kita dapat didik diri dan generasi yang akan datang lah.
Yeah, of course it goes hand in hand lah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think to conclude this this issue, I think institusi yang bersih bukanlah satu institusi yang tidak pernah dipersoalkan, tetapi ia adalah institusi yang cukup untuk menahan penelitian yang ada. Yeah.
Penting, dan ini penting untuk Sabah Jo, sebab kita ni dalam ambang kita mau bawa pembangunan, dan persepsi dan keyakinan itu penting dalam kepada keutuhan kita punya institusi untuk membawa perkembangan ekonomi yang baik.
Okay. Alright. So Nizam, next apa cerita di Sabah pula minggu ini?
So
baru-baru ini.
So basically kita ada isu kini sekarang bahawa ada banjir yang meluas, isu-isu banjir yang meluas di Sabah, dan saya dapat berita bahawa berita ini sudah meluas daripada berlarutan dari minggu lalu ke Tawau, ke Sandakan, dan hari ini saya rasa Tenem dan Beaufort mencatat paras keadaan banjir yang sangat teruk, dan ia menjadi satu isu berat yang kita selalu dengar setiap tahun. Tetapi saya rasa ini kali pertama kita nampak dia begitu awal. Sekarang baru Februari, dan dia sudah begitu merebak dengan luas, sehingga kan kita mempersoalkan kenapa kita masih lagi ada isu sebegini dan apakah sebenarnya yang berlaku.
Tapi before that, selain daripada bencana alam ini, of course ini perkara yang tidak boleh kita elakkan lah kan, sebab orang bilang ini sudah lumrah dunia kan.
Betul.
Baru-baru ini pun dalam minggu yang sama pun kita ada gempa bumi juga.
Ya betul, di Kudat kadang-kadang.
Kudat, ya, dekat-dekat perairan Kudat sana kan.
Terbesar untuk saya rasa
6.8 skala Richter, right? So dan ini bukan kali pertama. I think the last one was in 2015.
Okay, yes, betul. 10 years ago.
2015 di Kundas Ranau.
Betul.
Yeah, so walaupun nama kita ni Sabah negeri di bawah bayu, tetapi malangnya kita ni pun masih juga menghadapi risiko yang berada di Pasifik
di bawah tanah,
lingkaran api Pasifik tu kan.
Bukan sama macam di buku teks lah yang kita belajar.
Yang kita belajar dalam buku teks bebas, tetapi unfortunately ada pula kita, tapi mungkin tidak sekerap lah dengan
tidak mendengar negara lain lah,
negara jiran kita yang lain. Namun bagaimanapun saya rasa kita perlu fikir begini, alright? Banjir dan gempa bumi ini adalah bencana alam dan memang kita tidak boleh elakkan. Okay, tetapi skala gangguan dia seringkali adalah, of course, at the end of the day, pilihan tadbir urus. As you mentioned earlier, right? Adakah cerun dikawal ketat? Adakah longkang ataupun culvert diselenggarakan mengikut jadual? Adakah pembangunan lereng bukit dipantau secara disiplin? Ini masalah paling banyak ini kalau di tempat kami ni, Nizam, di Kiulu. Kalau bilang cerun landslide itu setiap berapa kilometer memang you akan tengok landslide. Well, that's how it is, you know. I mean, kami tinggal di kawasan tanah tinggi. Obviously, we are some more high tendency to ada landslides lah. So it's a normal thing. Namun we can't avoid this. But how do we mitigate this? I think that's the more more important question there. You know, mitigasi tanpa kecekapan pun susah juga, right? So bantuan adalah tanda balas ihsan. Yes, of course bantuan akan sentiasa datang, but then you know it has to be both lah. Kita bagi bantuan tapi dalam masa yang sama, how do you mitigate this, right? So this is what I think you know yang perlu diambil berat lah. So because saya bacakan facts sedikit lah kan. So, according to berita, ada lebih kurang 3,600 sudah yang ditempatkan di pusat-pusat sementara, up to 4,000 within hours. Dan kita ni masih dalam cuaca, dalam 5 hari lagi hujan lebat lagi. Yes, forecastnya masih lagi hujan untuk the remainder of the week. So we can expect more of this issue. Tapi betul Jo, I think dia bukan satu yang kita boleh elak bila bencana, tetapi dari segi persediaan kita dan bagaimana kita punya perancangan, I think di situ kita kena lihat kadang-kadang kalau tempat tu sudah memang prone to banjir, perlukah penempatan rumah di situ? Perlukah ada planning, longer term planning and bigger picture planning, kena pindah tempat ke atau apa? Sebab selain daripada mitigasi flood, perlu ada juga proper planning of where should residents stay, because you are trying to think of a bigger picture. Because data tu kita sudah ada selepas bencana setiap tahun dengan cuaca yang sudah apa, dan kita sudah ada ramalan cuaca yang menjangkakan musim-musim sebegini. Tetapi saya fikir isu yang utama adalah adakah mungkin kita punya respon disaster ni terlampau slow kerana bergantung dengan kerajaan pusat. Because funds, maybe if the state ada dia punya funds ni cepat sikit, tetapi I think reality dia itulah antara isu dia. Bila kita ada kerjasama, dia bergantung kepada ke tahap kerjasama rapat antara agensi tempatan PBT, agensi negeri, dan juga kalau funds from federal. Yes, so it seems to be an issue always that I see that there's a lot of red tape lah. Red tape yang kita unfortunately masih hadapi. Banyak birokrasi lah.
Betul. And when they do flood mitigation punya projects, it seems to be federal based parliament. Tapi bila dia dikumpulkan dengan perkara-perkara lain, contoh yang perlu attention negeri, flood mitigation selalu dibelakangkan. Sebab mungkin kita perlu bini sekolah, kita perlu kesihatan, kita perlu undang-undang untuk bisnes atau perumahan atau apa. Jadi bencana ni dibelakangkan sebab terlalu banyak priority. So that's why I think kita perlu cari jalan untuk pendapatan dan kita simpan kita punya dana supaya kita boleh dapat labur dalam persediaan bencana sendiri. Instead of waiting to see it happens, then ask for the emergency relief measures, because that, in a way, allows us to be more dependent upon federal, which is good and bad. Tapi at certain needs, kita tidak boleh terlampau ambil sambil lewat lah. Kita perlu ambil plans to be more autonomous in how we handle things. So that's why I
guess that's true. And decentralizing also these sort of matters is also very important, I think. Kan? But I like the idea when you mentioned that, you know, we have to have our own fund reliefs untuk ini mangsa-mangsa yang yang bencana alam ini.
Yes, betul.
And we have to learn from what also happened during the COVID-19.
Yes.
Yeah. So kita belajar bahawa krisis bukannya soal reaksi sahaja, tetapi ialah soal sistem.
Yeah.
Okay, ya soal data masa nyata juga, kan? And in fact, I think kalau saya boleh tambah, latihan itu pun very important.
Betul.
Macam contohnya
persediaan begitu
persediaan.
kan.
Okay, ingat masa kalau saya siap ada yang cerita dengan saya, dia cakap masa Gunung Kinabalu tu ketika itu ramai pelajar-pelajar kita pada masa itu baru belajar apa itu drop, cover and hole. Sebab tidak pernah kan melalui perkara itu. So, betul. You know, but kita belajar daripada apa yang semua berlaku ini. Contohnya macam COVID-19 dulu, COVID-19, where every funding we had to wait for federal government.
Yeah, betul.
And it was so slow on government at that time lah. And that was during the Warisan's time at that masa tu ya.
Alright.
And I still remember that the state government had to fork out their own money to
buy like mask, PPE, perkara-perkara begitu kan.
Mask and for that matter. And you know, every like the police, tentera was given ringgit 1 million for each, right? Because peruntukan daripada federal masa itu was very slow. Now we can learn from that, you know, and see, you know, how we can do better.
Betul.
Untuk apabila, you know, masalah-masalah ataupun isu-isu bencana yang tidak diduga. Seperti ini berlaku.
I think itulah yang perlu diutarakan lah, Jo, because bencana ni banyak berlaku bagi Sabah dan sudah lazim berlaku, tetapi kita masih belum nampak prioriti untuk mengubah cara kita handle bencana-bencana tersebut. Selain daripada macam bantuan-bantuan immediate relief lah, prevention yang lebih penting. Kadang-kadang saya nampak dalam kerjaya kita, bila dia ada peruntukan untuk buat projek mitigasi, kadang-kadang menjadi isu mengambil tanah pun, mau berunding dengan tuan tanah, berunding harga, baru melantik kontrak, itu makan masa. Jadi selesai pun sudah 2 kali banjir baru selesai kali. So those kind of things has to be given priority. And kita nampak bila dia selaras dengan baik, mungkin dalam contoh yang Joe bagikan COVID-19, bagaimana tu boleh berlaku. On certain parts it's going to be successful because streamline everything, cepat, dan ada satu SOP, senang, simple. But of course, like Joe mentioned, there are layers yang perlu juga local touch, di mana mungkin negeri saya tahu, dan mungkin kalau di peringkat PBT bahagian dunia yang tahu, atau kampung apa ni dia sudah tahu apa yang diperlukan. Kadang-kadang orang buat, dan kita ada syukurlah dengan bukan syukurlah juga, dengan keadaan bencana, kita ada banyak NGOs yang tampil ke depan, memberi kepakaran dan resources masing-masing. Ada yang bawa kemahiran, mungkin bawa kereta-kereta 4-wheel drive ke begitu. Ada juga yang bawa bantuan-bantuan sama ada duit atau barang-barang keperluan asas. But this kind of things just needs to be more streamlined and recognized, supaya dia cepat dia bergerak. So we're not short of people wanting to help, tapi it's a coordination and getting a framework lah, better
I guess
framework.
You know, it's of course bencana ini memang ujian empati kerajaan, but then at the same time ia juga adalah kesiapsiagaan, adalah ukuran kecekapan kerajaan itu sendiri.
Betul.
So you know, what we hope as Sabahans moving forward is that as you mentioned, I think it's very clear that satu, perlu ada satu sistem SOP, dan juga it has to be streamlined and becoming less dependent maybe from, of course we want funds from federal government, but while waiting for that, kita pun ada emergency relief funds for ourselves, for Sabah lah. So I think that's concludes to this
This session lah.
this session lah. Baik, terima kasih kerana bersama kami dalam episod yang ke-32 Smart Talk Sabah pada hari ini, dan semoga apa yang telah dibincangkan hari ini dapat menambah nilai dan juga memberi manfaat kepada kita di Sabah. Jadi jangan lupa untuk terus menyokong kami di Smart Talk Sabah, like dan juga subscribe kami di semua laman social media kami. Dan sehingga kita berjumpa pada episod yang akan datang lagi ya, Nizam?
Ya, betul.
Ya.
Cabar cakap,
Malaysia dengar.